And joining us now live is Kiambu Governor James Nyoro to shed more light on what's happening there. Governor, in the last week, at least 373 cases were reported. Today alone, 56 new cases. And despite Kiambu being the second most populous county in the country, and of course proximity to Nairobi, which is a hotspot, what else is contributing to these numbers rising?
Thank you very much, Vicky and Jeff, for having me. Yes, I think you are right. The fact that Kiambu is very close to Nairobi, which really is the hotspot for COVID-19, and with our people either working in Nairobi or Nairobi people coming to sleep in Kiambu, that is one of the causes of those high numbers, which is worrying. But we also have to remember that, like somebody said, the reason why you continue to record high numbers is also because you are testing. I think it is also important to note that we have been testing quite a number of cases. And it is important to say that we not only test ourselves, but some of these figures that you are seeing also include Kiambu people who are living outside the county. And when they feed in the form, they feed in Kiambu. So we have been testing more people, and that's probably part of the reason why the numbers are rising. Of course, you expect the numbers to rise because nationally the figures are rising. We are very close to Nairobi, and of course the testing. But you know, when you look at the attitude which you have just shown, of course it has contributed significantly, and as being 2.4 million people, the second most populous county in the whole country, of course, we will have a higher proportion of people being infected. But across the board, you can see that lack of observing the containment measures across the country is the same thing. It's not just Kiambu if you close Murang'a. But nevertheless, I think we are in the worst situation that we can ever be.
Governor, let me jump in if I may, if you don't mind. Let me ask you this. I was at an event with you about 2 months ago, and yes, there was social distancing, there was sanitizing. People were observing all the protocols. What's happened since, Governor? Because the numbers are literally spiking. Other than you testing more people becoming COVID positive, what's happening? What can you point your finger at and say?
You know, Jeff, what happened was immediately after COVID was announced early March, and a lot of measures were taken, including Kiambu County, and the event you are talking about was shortly, I think like 3 weeks after that. People were very worried, and we put in a lot of containment measures that included closing of markets and fumigating markets. There were quite a number of measures that were put. Remember also transport. A lot of matatus were not operating, and if they were operating, they were carrying half the people. So there were quite a number of containment measures that were put in place. Even when eating places were closed, if you can remember, there were instances where even bars were closed and social places were closed. Generally, there was a likelihood that, the people actually were following the protocol, the containment protocols. But, you remember over time, there was a time when people started to behave like COVID is no longer. And, you started to see traffic jams. You started to see people going to the markets and even when the issue of masks came in. So it was that period after people were worried and then they realized like COVID is no longer, that we started to realize the problems that we are realizing. To the extent that when the epidemic started rising, that is the time when people had totally ignored the containment measures. So it is a double blow, as it were.
And Governor, beyond the numbers rising, another worry is the deaths. I mean, the course of 2 days, you're reporting 15 deaths. What is the challenge? Is it an issue of equipment or personnel? What needs to be done to ensure that a county like Kiambu is able to stem that issue of deaths?
Thank you, Vicky. I think first I would want to correct the impression that was created, and I talked to the CS CS Mutahi about it. The figure was that was quoted that 10 people had died one day in Kiambu level 5 was really not true. And I'm not saying that people are not dying, but we have to face facts as they are. What there is that we have had a total of 40 deaths. Out of the 40 deaths, 10 are from Kiambu level 5. So the report that indicated, in any case, we have 14 isolation beds in Kiambu level 5. A lot of our isolation beds are in Tigoni. So we will not have lost 10 people in one day. But nevertheless, we are losing people. In fact, I can tell you that talking to funeral homes, there are indications that they are recording more numbers than they recorded before COVID, which means that there is a lot of community deaths that are taking place. But obviously, there is a time like whenever there is a community death, it happens posthumously. Therefore, it is true that the mortality rate is going up. As numbers are going up, as you know, the incidences of mild to severe symptoms are going up. I can tell you that when we opened Tigoni as a COVID center, we've already had about 120 patients so far. Half of them have recovered. They've been asymptomatic and they have gone home. We've had some casualties, not as many as you would think. In fact, Tigoni, we've not had more than 4 casualties. But that does not mean that we are not having casualties. In fact, I can tell you, even across the country, a lot of casualties are happening at home.
And just to follow up on that, how prepared is the county? Because beyond having isolation beds, when it comes to caring for critical COVID-19 patients, you need ICU beds. And we know, of course, the county upped that number, oxygen tanks as well. So how prepared are you once those numbers start increasing when it comes to critical care patients?
The most important thing, Victoria, is to be ahead of the game. What we did was we dedicated Tigoni to be a COVID center with a capacity of 230 beds. We also, at that point, and you remember, all this evidence is coming in. Initially, we were all told to buy ventilators, and we bought some ventilators. We have 34 ventilators. But we realized that what is most important is bulk oxygen. So in all our 4 facilities, that is Tigoni, Kiambu, Thika, and Gatundu, we have installed bulk oxygen, which is piped to the wards and directed to the beds. As we talk now, about 12 patients in Tigoni are on oxygen. And outside the ward, there is a whole tank where bulk oxygen is provided. So the most important thing, even before the patient gets to ICU, is to be able to be catered for with bulk oxygen. Now in Tigoni, we have an ICU with a capacity of 14 beds and 14 ventilators. We have 2 anesthetists with several critical care nurses. We've not had a patient, I can tell you, in Tigoni who requires a ventilator, but we have 12 who are requiring oxygen. So as far as that is concerned, we have beds. When we look at the trends, and we have modeled to say that if this trend continues, we are likely to require about 1,200 beds for mild and severe patients only, because we have stopped admitting asymptomatic patients. Those ones should do home care, and we are also developing communal isolation centers. But with those ones, with the level that we are talking about, 1,200, we cannot cope. And that is where we are talking about. And this is very important,
right,
that we have to bring those numbers down. And the way to bring the numbers down is to make sure that we maintain the containment measures. And that is why a lot of people are making noise and crying about closing bars. We'll be closing some markets and fumigating them and opening them again.
Right.
We'll be having a patrol to go around and see people who are not putting in masks, so that we reduce the level of 56. We bring it back to 20-something. Then we can be able to cope. So over and above the preparedness, the prevention measure is very, very important.
Absolutely. Containment will make all the difference. Thank you so much for your time, Governor. Of course, we'll continue to monitor the situation in Kiambu as it develops. Now, the COVID